Time for a little Sebenza maintenance on the Apostle P channel. Stay tuned, guys. We'll get inside. Hi, gang. Rob here. It is the evening of 2 January 2014, and tonight we're going to get into a little Sebenza maintenance. And it's been a couple months since I've had this knife apart and cleaned it and lubricated it, so we're going to do that tonight. I thought I'd show you how I do it after some trial and error and some study in other people's videos. I think I've arrived at a process that that does a good job, and I thought while we're inside I might just talk about some of the things that make a Sebenza. So what are we going to need for this? First thing is the factory Chris Reeve Knives Allen wrench. Then we're going to need, I've got a bottle that says on it Flitz Gun and Knife Cleaner. The Flitz Gun and Knife Cleaner has been gone for, I don't know, a couple years, and I refill it with a high-tech solvent and cleaner known as Windex. That's what's in here. And for lubrication, we're going to be using the Finish Line brand of fluorinated grease. I like this a little bit better than the Chris Reeve Knives grease because of this cool applicator. It's like a syringe kind of applicator. About the same product. I do think the Finish Line Extreme Fluoro is just a little more viscous than the CRK grease. Might use a Q-tip or two. And we're going to use WD-40. But we're not going to use it for a lubricant. If you guys have seen Blade HQ's Chris Reeve Knives shop tour, you'll know what we're going to use this for. It's a secret. So let's get started. What we're going to do, and it's very much a good idea not to use any Loctite when putting together your Chris Reeve Sebenza, because these fasteners are really designed not to need any thread locker. And if you do use thread locker, they tend to spin in their holes. We don't want to do that. We want to keep track of what's going where here. No rocket science involved here. You really can't mess these knives up unless you put them together wrong, and I'll show you what's right and what's wrong as we get going. Just keep track of where everything goes. Now I'm totally disassembling the knife, which you don't necessarily have to do for cleaning, but we are tonight. I always like to keep track of which side of my washer goes toward the blade, and I have that lying up. And then there's the pivot bushing. Oh, gone. Sticky with grease. There we go. Okay. So, as you can see, all 3 points of contact use identical pivots. These little guys right here are pivots. And then around each pivot goes a bushing. This is the titanium bushing that goes in the butt of the knife. This is the stop pin bushing. This is the pivot bushing. All 3 of those bushings are extremely precisely controlled for height, and the scales, as you've seen on my video that reviews the knife and others, are surface ground for flatness. Titanium kind of loves Windex. Oh, I don't want to forget this guy. This is the lanyard pin, and as you can see, mine has a tiny piece of cut off melted paracord in it. I don't use my lanyard, but I do like to keep the pivot, keep the lanyard bar in the knife. I don't like it to fall out, and I kind of like the way it looks, so I use this just as a placeholder. But the titanium does love Windex, so what we're going to do now is we're going to soak all these components in Windex and clean them up. Talk amongst yourselves, nothing exciting here. No need to remove the pocket clip, and trust me, unless you have to remove a Sebenza pocket clip, you don't want to remove a Sebenza pocket clip. They are extremely tightly fit. Okay, there's one. Do the other handle scale. Sorry guys if this is a little boring. I just didn't really want to leave anything out. I wanted you to be able to see there's not really any mystery inside these knives. Going to hit my blue parts with a little Windex, because the Windex kind of brings out the blue in titanium parts that are anodized that color. Just want everything clean, and I want all my fasteners to be free of oil or lube of any kind, because the way that they like to bite into the titanium frame as they gain their tightness, you don't want any lube on them, and you don't want any thread locker on them. Just want everything clean and dry. Now, just for routine lubrication, you don't need to totally disassemble the knife, as I said, and I will show you when I get to that point kind of where that break is. And one more thing to, well, I guess I got a couple more things to clean. Clean out our pivot. Go over our washers real quick. I've got this paper towel pretty wetted. I'm gonna wipe these washers off with a clean paper towel before I go back together. That one's about done. Now, these washers have been sanded and polished to size by me to achieve what I perceive as optimum action. We're not going to do that. They're all corrosion free, and I know they're already the right size for me. I think I've got this one flipped over. Yeah, I do. Okay. A couple areas to be real mindful of. The lock face. I want to make sure there's no goo on it. Okay. Now we're ready sort of to go back together. So, I like to start at the back on the side of the knife that does not have the pocket clip, because it sits flat and doesn't let my pivots fall out. If you set it pocket clip down, they tend to fall out, so we don't want that. Let's go back in with my my lanyard pin. Let's see, there we go. Stop pin bushing. And now we leave out the pivot. And we can assemble the rest of the knife Sorry guys if you can't see that. It's not helping you much, is it? Okay. So, the stop pin pivot screw or stop pin screw, we're going to tighten all the way down, and then we're just going to back it off about a quarter turn. And I'll show you why we do that in just a second. Now, this back standoff, we can go ahead and tighten all the way. Okay. Now, kind of important, two different size washers on a Sebenza. The small washer goes on the lock bar side, the large washer goes on the off side, and I've discussed this in my in-depth Sebenza videos. The large washer actually supports the pressure of the lock bar against the knife blade to keep that perfect centering. No matter what position the knife is in throughout its travel, that detent ball is going to be pressing directly opposite this large washer, so the blade is never cantilevered over the edge of the washer with the pressure of that lock bar. Pretty cool. Okay, now we'll move the handle over just a second, and we're going to go into blade assembly. So let's see which side's which. Okay, this is the little washer side. What we're going to do is we're going to place a few drops of our fluoro grease around the periphery of that hole. And we're going to go on with the washer. Put a couple dabs in these holes. It's okay if those stick up a little. It's going to lubricate the outside of the washer. We're going to do the same thing on the other side of the knife. Yeah, that might be a little much. Let's see here. You guys were wondering what that Q-tip was for, huh? Yeah, that was a lot too much. Okay. And washer. And then a little grease for good measure in the holes. And then a little grease in the hole in the blade, just to give the pivot bushing some lubrication. And now we go in with the pivot bushing. And try not to get your fingers too gooey. What we're looking for is the pivot bushing centered in the blade so that it restrains both washers. And then we're going to insert this blade in the handle. Now the reason I left this screw a quarter turn loose is to give the blade room to slide in. I'm just going to jam the fat of my finger in the spine to kind of hold those sides apart, and then we're going in. Everything slides in nicely. Want to relieve the lock bar. And let's see, our pivot's coming from this side. Whoops. And that's through. Now we can come in with our screw. The reason I want that front that blade stop screw only a quarter turn loose is it's very important that my washers are restrained and are not allowed to slip over the edge of that pivot bushing. Okay, let's move it a few times just to make sure we're not out of kilter. Okay, now we can tighten all of our fasteners. So down goes the stop pin. Down goes the back standoff, just checking to make sure it's tight. And down goes the pivot. Now, I tighten these more than, I guess, finger tight. I tighten them till there's a little bow in the Allen wrench, just to make sure I got a good bite. And if everything's together right, we should have nice free blade, no blade play, and perfect centering. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to mash the end of this Q-tip so it fits in between my scales and just kind of clean up my excess. Seems like I always get a wad of goo around my stop pin, which isn't a horribly critical area, but no reason for it. We definitely don't want any stray grease in the proximity of the lock face. Okay. Let's see what we got. Whoop. We got a slippery thumb is what we got. There we go. Look at that. Perfect. Yep. Now, I will say this. Over the first few days, as that grease sort of squeezes in and into the crevices and moves around where it needs to in the knife, that action will free up just a hair. Okay, we'll give that blade a good wipe and get all of our excess grease out of there. Got a little glob right there I need to get out. And then that brings us sort of to the last step. And this is the WD-40 stage. This is what they do when they ship a Sebenza. They coat that thing in WD-40. Now, we don't want this inner pivot, because that's not the kind of lubrication we're looking for. But it gives the knife this wonderful sheen and a consistency in the surface of that titanium. Spread that around a little bit with the Q-tip, and then give it one good wipe. They get a little blotchy, these scales do, after that Windex starts to dry. And when you go back in with the WD, they just get this nice uniform kind of hue and texture. And now, I don't know if I made this really clear, but very important when you're going back together that you not let these scales be too loose or too far apart. It's very important that as that blade and washer assembly slides into the knife, that the washers not be allowed to slip over the surface of the pivot bushing, or when you tighten them down, you'll mash the washer on the edge of the pivot bushing, and then you'll ruin the washer, and your action of your knife will be all jacked up. And you guys have probably seen some YouTube videos of Sebenzas with bad centering, and I can virtually guarantee you they were victims of that. Somebody's had them apart, put them back together wrong, and that's what you get, because the washers get all kinked up. Let's take a look at my centering. Huh, imagine that. It's just as it should be. And we've got a perfectly functioning Sebenza. Let's see about blade play. And guess what? There's none. That's all there is to that, guys. Hope that helps. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the comments. That's all for tonight. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp.